Hey everybody, can you hear me? I'm hoping. I've not done YouTube live. So give me a thumbs up if I'm loud enough, if you can hear it. Maybe you, Abby, could turn your volume up. If I'm loud enough, if you can hear it. Can you that sounds good. Can you unhook from that speaker, just slide down from the top and shut Bluetooth off? Okay, I think we can. So here's the book we're going to be starting in. And as I was kind of going through it, it looks like it's going to be a little more than a chapter because the chapters go so quick with C.S. Lewis's book. So I'm gonna read and see how comfortable we feel, and we'll enjoy this together. So the back of the book, to give you an idea of what's going on, says this. Just one sec. I'm gonna try to. I see. Looks like I'm talking and the live stream hasn't started yet for some. So we'll see in one sec. There we go. Just refreshed it. And so I'll read the back of the book, and what I think would be good is as you're sitting there, put your thinking cap on. Remember how my school teachers used to make us put our thinking caps on. And if something comes to your mind, just make a comment. I'm not going to necessarily get to the comments in real time here, but I'll be able to look at them later. And hopefully, our little group here can talk back and forth with one another about what they've noticed and just create an online dialogue and about this. You should be able to come back to it at any time, and you should be able to share this with friends as we go on. So this is our first one. Share this with friends as we go. My family's in the background. If you hear any kind of funny sounds, we're all kind of getting used to this. We're sitting around there coloring, and so if you hear somebody like fall off a couch or something, don't be alarmed unless you see me make an alarming face. But what I think is important about this book, the reason why it's one of my favorites, is because C.S. Lewis takes his creativity and addresses a subject of hell and punishment, and I think he does it in a creative way. So as we dive into this book, remember that you can come back, read it at any time, or listen to it again, share it with friends, and I would really encourage you, though, to engage with it, ask questions, or think about what you're hearing. And if you have any questions, of course, you can put them in the comments, and perhaps me or one of the other listeners will engage with that comment as well. So the back of the book says, in The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis again employs his formidable talent for fable and allegory. The writer finds himself in hell, boarding a bus bound for heaven. The amazing opportunity is that anyone who wants to stay in heaven can. This is the starting point for an extraordinary meditation upon good and evil, grace and judgment. Lewis's revolutionary idea is the discovery that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. In Lewis's own words, if we insist on keeping hell, or even earth, we shall not see heaven. If we accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell. So, this is a great book. I think you're going to enjoy it. Let's begin. I'll begin with the preface. I have to get comfortable and have some tea first. Okay, somebody said, Pastor Abel, the chat is disabled on live. Okay, it's not. What you actually have to do is go back. So go out of it and then go back to click on the link, and it should bring you right up. We have 4 people joining us right now, and I put 2 links on Facebook. So this isn't a Facebook Live. This is actually YouTube Live, but I put a link to it. So I'll give folks a second. And let me know if you're able to get on. I just helped somebody get on as well. I want to make sure everybody can join us. Ab, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can do chats.
The chat is disabled. Let me see what I can do with that, because I think I misunderstood Jill. Let me get on and check that. This is all new for me too. So let's see. Okay. This is really weird. I'm going to be looking at myself, looking at myself, looking at myself. Okay, how do I turn that on? Settings, let's see. We'll see if I can turn it on in here. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. And if anyone has any ideas on how the heck to turn chat on, that would be awesome. Let's see. Part of the problem is that YouTube just created kind of this new live, and so one of the things I'm seeing is that they don't have the controls right here on the page like I'm used to. And I should just be able to turn chat on during live, but I can't. So we might not be able to have that now until I figure out how to do that. Yeah, Studio's not giving me the controls. So what I would encourage you to do is maybe chat on Facebook and put the comments there, and let's see how that works for now. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Write notes down on a piece of paper, and if I can figure a way to get chat enabled at some point, I'll do that. I'm kind of a one-man show, so we got to figure it out as we go along. All right, so I'll get started with the preface. Blake wrote, the marriage of heaven and hell. If I have written of their divorce, this is not because I think myself a fit antagonist for so great a genius, nor even because I feel at all sure that I know what he meant. But in some sense or other, the attempt to make the marriage is perennial. The attempt is based on the belief that reality never presents us with an absolutely unavoidable either or. That, granted, skill and patience, and above all, time enough, some way of embracing both alternatives can always be found. That mere development or adjustment or refinement will somehow turn evil into good without our being called on in any way for a final and total rejection of anything we should like to retain. This belief I take to be a disastrous error. You cannot take all luggage with you on all journeys. On one journey, even your right hand and your right eye may be among things you have to leave behind. We are not living in a world where all roads are radii of a circle or radii of a circle, and where all, if followed long enough, will therefore draw gradually nearer and finally meet at the center. Rather, in a world where every road, after a few miles, forks into two, and each of those into two again. And at each fork, you must make a decision. Even on the biological level, life is not like a river, but like a tree. It does not move forwards or towards unity, but away from it. And the creatures grow further apart as they increase in perfection. Good, as it ripens, becomes continually more different, not only from evil, but from other good. I do not think that all who choose wrong roads perish, but their rescue consists in being put back on the right road. Some can be put right, but only by going back till you find the air and working it afresh from that point, never by simply going on. Evil can be undone, but it cannot develop into good. Time does not heal it. The spell must be unwound bit by bit with backwards mutters of deserving power, or else not. It is still either or. If we insist on keeping hell, or even earth, we shall not see heaven. If we accept heaven, we shall not be. Any man who reaches heaven will find that what he abandoned, even in plucking out his right eye, has not been lost. That the kernel of what he was really seeking, even in the most depraved wishes, will be there, beyond expectation, waiting for him in the high countries. In that sense, it will be true for those who have completed the journey, and for no others, to say that good is everything and heaven everywhere. But we, at this end of the road, must not try to anticipate that retrospective vision. If we do, we are likely to embrace the false and disastrous converse and fancy that everything is good and everywhere is heaven. But what, you ask, of earth? Earth, I think, will not be found by anyone to be in the end a very distant place. I think earth, if chosen instead of heaven, will turn out to have been, all along, only a region in hell. And earth, if put second to heaven, to have been from the beginning a part of heaven itself. There are only two things more to be said about this small book. Firstly, I must acknowledge my debt to a writer whose name I have forgotten, and whom I have read several years ago in a highly colored American magazine of what they call science fiction or scientification, or whatever the word is that he's using. The unbendable An unbreakable quality of my heavenly matter was suggested to me by him, though he used the fancy for a different and most ingenious purpose. His hero traveled into the past and there, very properly, found raindrops that would pierce him like bullets and sandwiches with no strength, and sandwiches that no strength could bite, because, of course, nothing in the past can be altered. I, with less originality, but I hope equal propriety, have transferred this to the eternal. If the writer of that story ever reads these lines, I ask him to accept my grateful acknowledgement. The second thing is this: I beg readers to remember that this is a fantasy. It has, of course, or I intended it to have, a moral, but the transmortal conditions are solely an imaginative supposal. They are not even a guess or a speculation at what may actually await us. The last thing I wish is to arouse factual curiosity about the details of the afterworld. C.S. Lewis, April 1945. And now we begin the first chapter of The Great Divorce. And I want to welcome everybody here. And as I begin this, right now, as I'm learning how to do YouTube Live, we don't have chat on. So you can chat on Facebook and you can write your notes down and put those down when I do get chat turned on. But here we go. I seemed to be standing in a busy queue by the side of a long, mean street. Evening was just closing in, and it was raining. I had been wandering for hours in similar mean streets, always in the rain and always in evening twilight. Time seemed to have paused on that dismal moment when only a few shops have lit up, and it is not yet dark enough for their windows to look cheering. And just as the evening never advanced to night, so my walking had never brought me to the better parts of this town. However far I went, I found only dingy lodging houses, small tobacconists, hoardings from which posters hung in rags, windowless warehouses, goods, stations without trains, and bookshops of the sort that sell the works of Aristotle. I never met anyone, but for the little crowd at the bus stop, the whole town seemed to be empty. I think that was why I attached myself to the queue. I had a stroke of luck right away, for just as I took my stand, a little waspish woman who would have been ahead of me snapped out at a man who seemed to be with her. "Very well, then, I won't go at all, so there," and left the queue. "Pray don't imagine," said the man in a very dignified voice, "that I care about going in the least. I have only been trying to please you, for Pete's sake. My own feelings are, of course, a matter of no importance. I quit. I quite understand that." And suiting the action to the world, he also walked away. Come, thought I, that's 2 places I gained. I was now next to a very short man with a scowl, who glanced at me with an expression of extreme disfavor and observed rather unnecessarily loud to the man behind him, "This sort of thing really makes one think twice about going at all." "What sort of thing?" growled the other, a big beefy person. "Well," said the short man, "this is hardly the sort of society I'm used to, as a matter of fact." "Huh," said the big man, and then added with a glance at me, "Don't you stand any sauce from him, mister. You're not afraid of him, are you?" Then, seeing I made no move, he rounded suddenly on the short man and said, "Not good enough for you, aren't we? Like your lip?" Next moment, he had fetched the short man one on the side of the face that sent him sprawling into the gutter. Let him lay, said the big man, to no one in particular. I'm a plain man, that's what I am, and I gotta have my rights, same as anyone else, see? As the short man showed no disposition to rejoin the queue and soon began limping away, I closed up, rather cautiously, behind the big man, and congratulated myself on having gained yet another step. A moment later, two young people in front of him also left us arm in arm. They were both so trousered, slender, giggly, and falsetto that I could be sure of the sex of neither. But it was clear that each, for the moment, preferred the other to the chance of a place in the bus. We shall never all get in, said a female voice with a whine in it. Said someone else. I heard the clink of money and then a scream and a female voice mixed with roars of laughter from the rest of the crowd. The cheated woman leaped out of her place to fly at the man who had bilked her, but the others immediately closed up and flung her out, so that with one thing and another, the queue had reduced itself to manageable proportions long before the bus ever appeared. It was a wonderful vehicle, blazing with golden light, herodolically colored. The driver himself seemed full of light, and he used only one hand to drive with. The other he waved before his face as if to fan away the greasy stream of the rain. A growl went up from the queue as he came in. Looks as if he had a good time of it, eh? Bloody pleased with himself, I bet. My dear, why can't he behave naturally? Thinks himself too good to look at us. Who does he imagine that he is? All that gilding and purple, I call it a wicked waste. Why don't they spend some of that money on their house property down here? God, I'd like to give him one in the ear hole. I could see nothing in the countenance of the driver to justify all this, though, unless it were that he had a look of authority and seemed intent on carrying out his job. My fellow passengers fought like hens to get on board the bus, though there was plenty of room for us all. I was the last to get in, the bus only half full, and I selected a seat at the back, well away from the others. But a tousle-haired youth at once came and sat down beside me. As he did so, we moved off. I thought you wouldn't mind my tacking on to you, he said, for I've noticed that you feel just as I do about the present company. Why on earth they insist on coming, I can't imagine. They won't like it at all when we get there, and they'd really be much more comfortable at home. It's different for you and me. Do you like this place? I asked. As much as they'd like anything, he answered. They've got cinemas and fish and chips. They've got shops and advertisements and all sorts of things they want. The appalling lack of any intellectual life doesn't worry them. I realized as soon as I got here that there'd been some mistake. I ought to have taken the first bus, but I fooled about trying to wake people up here. I found a few fellows I'd known before and tried to form a little circle, but they all seemed to have sunk to the level of their surroundings. Even before we came here, I had some doubts about a man like Cyril Blello. I always thought he was working in a false idiom, but he was at least intellectual. One could get some criticism worth hearing from him, even if he was a failure on the creative side. but now he seems to have nothing left but his self-conceit. The last time I tried to read him some of my own stuff, but wait a minute, I'd just like you to look at it, relishing with a shudder that what he was producing from his pocket was a thick wad of typed paper. I muttered something about not having my spectacles and exclaimed, "Hello, we've left the ground." It was true. Several hundred feet below us, already half hidden in the rain and mist, the wet roofs of the town appeared, spreading without a break as far as the eye could reach. That was chapter 1. We're going to move into chapter 2 and finish up with this chapter for today. I was not left very long at the mercy of the tousle-headed poet, because another passenger interrupted our conversation. But before that happened, I had learned a good deal about him. He appeared to be a singularly ill-used man. His parents had never appreciated him, and none of the 5 schools at which he had been educated seemed to have made any provision for a talent and temperament such as his. To make matters worse, he had been exactly the sort of boy in whose case the examination system works out with the maximum unfairness and absurdity. It was not until he reached the university that he began to recognize that all these injustices did not come by chance, but were the inevitable results of our economic system. Capitalism did not merely enslave the workers, it also vitiated taste and vulgarized intellect, hence our educational system, and hence the lack of recognition for his new genius. This discovery had made him a communist. But when the war came along and he saw Russia in an alliance with the capitalist governments, he had found himself once more isolated and had to become a conscientious objector. The indignities he suffered at this stage of his career had, he confessed, embittered him. He decided he could serve the cause best by going to America. But then America came into the war too. It was at this point that he suddenly saw Sweden as the home of a really new and radical art. But the various oppressors had given him no facilities for going to Sweden. There were more troubles. His father, who had never progressed beyond the most atrocious mental complacency and smugness of the Victorian epoch, was given him a ludicrously inadequate allowance. And he had been very badly treated by a girl, too. He had thought her a really civilized and adult personality. And then she had unexpectedly revealed that she was a mass of bourgeois prejudices and monogamous instincts. Jealousy, possessiveness was a quality he particularly disliked. She had even shown herself at the end to be mean about money. That was the last straw. He had jumped under a train. I gave a start, but he took no notice. Even then, he continued. I'll luck had continued to dog him. He'd been sent to the Greytown. But of course, it was a mistake. I would find, he assured me, that all other passengers would be with me on the return journey. But he would not. He was going to stay there. He felt quite certain that he was going where, at last, his finely critical spirit would no longer be outraged by the uncongenial environment, where he would find recognition and appreciation. Meanwhile, since I hadn't got my glasses, he would read me the passage about which Cyril Blelot had been so insensitive. It was just then that we were interrupted. One of the quarrels, which were perpetually simmering in the bus, had boiled over, and for a moment there was a stampede. Knives were drawn, pistols were fired, but it all seemed strangely innocuous. And when it was over, I found myself unharmed, though in a different seat and with a new companion. He was an intelligent looking man with a rather bulbous nose and a bowler hat. I looked out of the windows. We were now so high that all below us had become featureless, but fields, rivers, or mountains I did not see. And I got the impression that the gray town still filled the whole field of vision. It seems the deuce of a town, I volunteered. And that's what I can't understand. The parts of it that I saw were so empty. Was there once a much larger population? Not at all, said my neighbor. The trouble is that they're so quarrelsome. As soon as anyone arrives, he settles in some street. Before he's been there 24 hours, he quarrels with his neighbor. Before the week is over, he's quarreled so badly that he decides to move. Very likely, he finds the next street empty because all the people there have quarreled with their neighbors and moved. If so, he settles in. If by chance the street is full, he goes further. But even if he stays, it makes no odds. He's sure to have another quarrel pretty soon, and then he'll move. He'll move on again. Finally, he'll move right out to the edge of town and build a new house. You see, it's easy here. You've only got to think a house, and there it is. That's how the town keeps on growing. Leaving more and more empty streets? That's right. And time's sort of odd here. That place where we caught the bus is thousands of miles from the civic center where all the newcomers arrive from Earth. All the people you've met were living near the bus stop, but they'd taken centuries of our time to get there by gradual removals. And what about the earlier arrivals? I mean, there must be people who came from the Earth to your town even longer ago. That's right, there are. They've been moving on, getting farther apart. They're so far off by now that they could never think of coming to the bus stop at all. Astronomical distances. There's a bit of rising ground near where I lived, and a chap had a telescope. You can see the lights of the inhabited houses where those old ones live. Millions and millions of miles. Millions of miles from us and from one another. Every now and then, when they move farther still, that's one of the disappointments. I thought you'd meet interesting historical characters, but you don't. They're too far away. Would they get to the bus stop in time if they ever set out? Well, theoretically, but it'd be a distance of light years, and they wouldn't want to by now. Not those old chaps like Tamburlaine and Genghis Khan or Julius Caesar or Henry V. Wouldn't want to? That's right. The nearest of those old ones is Napoleon. We know that because two chaps made the journey to see him. They'd start long before I came, of course, but I was there when they came back. About 15,000 years of our time it took them. We've picked out the house by now, just a little pinprick of light and nothing else near it for millions of miles. But they got there? That's right. He built himself a huge house, all in the empire style, rows of windows flaming with light, though it only shows as a pinprick from where I live. Did they see Napoleon? That's right. They went up and looked through one of the windows. Napoleon was there, all right. What was he doing? Walking up and down, all the time. Left, left, right, never stopping for a moment. The two chaps watched him for about a year, and he never rested, and muttering to himself all the time, it was Solt's fault. It was Ney's fault. It was Josephine's fault. It was the fault of the Russians. It was the fault of the English. Like that all the time. Never stopped for a moment. A little fat man, and he looked kind of tired, but he didn't seem able to stop it. From the vibrations, I gathered that our bus was still moving, but there was now nothing to be seen from the windows, which confirmed this nothing but gray void above and below. Then the town will go on spreading infinitely, I said. That's right, said the intelligent man, unless someone can do something about it. How do you mean? Well, as a matter of fact, between you and me and the wall, that's my job at the moment. What's the trouble about this place? Not all the people are quarrelsome. That's only human nature and was always the same, even on Earth. Trouble is, they have no needs. You get everything you want. Not very good quality, of course, but just imagining it. That's why it never costs any trouble to move to another street or build another house. In other words, there's no proper economic basis for any community life. If they needed real shops, chaps would have to stay near where the real shops were. If they needed real houses, they'd have to stay near where the builders were. It's scarcity that enables society to exist. Well, that's where I come in. I'm not going on this trip for my health. As far as that goes, I don't think it would suit me up there. But if I can come back with some real commodities, anything at all that you could really bite or actually drink or sit on, why, at once you'd get a demand down in our town. I'd start a little business. I'd have something to sell. You'd soon get people coming to live near centralization. 2 fully inhabited streets would accommodate the people that are now spread over 1 million square miles of empty streets. I'd make a nice little profit and be a public benefactor as well. You mean if they had to live together, they'd gradually learn to quarrel less? Well, I don't know about that. I dare say I could be kept a bit quieter. You'd have a chance to build up a police force, knock some kind of discipline into them. Anyway, here he dropped his voice. It'd be better, you know. Everyone admits that. Safety in numbers. Safety from what? I began, but my companion nudged me to be silent. I changed my question. But look here, said I. If they can get everything just by imagining it, why would they want any real things, as you call them? Eh? Oh, well, they'd like houses. That really kept out the rain. Their present houses don't. Well, of course not. How could they? What the devil is the use of building them then? The intelligent man put his head closer to mine. Safety again, he muttered. At least the feeling of safety. It's all right now, but later on, you understand. What? Said I, almost involuntarily sinking my own voice to a whisper. He articulated noiselessly as if expecting that I understood lip reading. I put my ear up close to his mouth. Speak up, I said. It will be dark presently, he mouthed. You mean the evening is really going to turn into night in the end? He nodded. What's that got to do with it? Said I. Well, no one wants to be out of doors when that happens. Why? His reply was so furtive that I had to ask him several times to repeat it. When he had done so, being a little annoyed, as one so often is with whisperers, I replied without remembering to lower my voice. Who are they? I asked. And what are you afraid they'll do to you? And why should they come out when it's dark? And what protection would an imaginary house give if there was any danger? "Here," shouted the big man. "Who's talking all that stuff? You stop your whispering, you two. If you don't, if you want a hiding, see, spreading rumors, and that's what I call it, you shut your face. Do you see? Quite right. Scandalous. Ought to be prosecuted. How did they get on the bus?" growled the passengers. A fat, clean shaven man who sat on the seat in front of me leaned back and addressed me in a cultured voice. "Excuse me," he said, "but I couldn't help overhearing parts of your conversation. It's astounding how these primitive superstitions linger on." And tonight, that's where we're going to stop. We'll begin again next week. But what do you think of Napoleon? It's probably one of my favorite images of him marching up and down the roads. And what do you think of this guy who wants to go up to heaven and get some valuable stuff and sell it down in Greytown? If you have any thoughts or if this impacted you in any way, go ahead and for now, go back to the Facebook post where I had this and make some comments, and I'll see what I can get going by next week. But for now, that's the preface, chapter 1, and almost all the way through chapter 2 of The Great Divorce. Okay, well, hopefully we'll see you next week, and I'll get this commenting squared away. Have a good evening.